Just to start off, what was it like being an 18-year-old girl and founding your own company? Did you have any doubts? Were you influenced by anyone or by yourself? Do you have any decisions?
Yeah, so I guess starting my first company at 18, it was exciting. Just because, you know, you're fresh out of high school, you're like, the whole world is mine. What do I want to do with this world as my playground, right? And so I thought, you know, starting a business with my brother would be a great way to, A, get a lot of real world experience, and then B, you know, go out and create something that I can really call my own, something that is completely something that I've thought of, and my brother have thought of, and, you know, it's influenced completely by us.
So when you started the business, did you have the idea that it's going to turn into a full-fledged like business that you're going to devote all your time to, or was it just something that you thought you could do on the side?
When we actually started working on it, it was like a side project. My brother and I had just graduated high school. My brother had just finished his sophomore year at the University of Southern California in LA. And my parents were just like, all right, you guys need to like eventually go get internships, and so we're going to give you one more summer. You can kind of do whatever you want, you know, live it up, because you realize that like after this, it's like you're in the working world, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were like, all right, well, we're going to take the summer and start this little side project that we have. And from there, it just kind of, it turned into a full-fledged business, but it didn't start out that way.
So you were able to get funding by actively working to get in contact with Richard Branson, and eventually you got $1 million from him, which is amazing. What was that experience like, trying to get that funding and then having so much faith in your product that you were able to push it and get that funding?
Yeah, definitely. So getting the funding was kind of a unique story, because it's one of those things where, you know, I always say the power of social media. We got our funding because I saw a tweet on Twitter that said, come meet me in Miami for intimate cocktails, donate $2,000 to charity. And there was an email address the next tweet, and I just took that and I was just like, you know what, like, you only get this opportunity once in a lifetime. So I took the email address and I was like, hey, so I'm not legally old enough to drink cocktails in the U.S., but I would love to come meet Richard Branson, since he's obviously one of the biggest and most well-known entrepreneurs. And so then I got that email back that said, yeah, if you and your brother can donate $4,000 and be here in 48 hours, then come on. And at the time I was like one of those, I guess this is where it pays to be a little naive. I was like, oh, this is totally possible. Like, I don't have $4,000, but I could probably borrow it from someone, and like I can get on a flight right now. So, so I just, you know, my brother and I called up our parents and we're like, we need to borrow $4,000. And my parents were like, you kids are absolutely crazy, but it's a lesson in money management if we give you the $4,000. And so they gave it to us with the expectation we had to pay it back in 3 months. And we just took it and we went to Miami. And we knew that our product was something that was needed, right? Like usernames and passwords is what our product does. We store usernames and passwords on the cloud and auto-log people into things. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you know, everyone has usernames and passwords online. So that's where our confidence came from. It was solving a real need.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So you've worked with some amazing people. You've worked with Richard Branson, and you've worked with Jerry Murdoch, and you've worked with the Photo Bucket co-founder Alex Welch. So what was that experience like for you? What kind of advice and mentorship did you receive from them?
Definitely. So all three of them are great people, right? And all three of them, well, Branson has an advisor, Jono, and he was very hands-on with us and, you know, walking us through the process and the steps, and they were always there to answer questions for us when we needed them. I know there are tons of times, and Alex in particular, we went to and we were like, hey, so what do you think about this? Just because his product was more of like, Photo Bucket was a consumer play at one point in time, and so he kind of understands that. And so they were really helpful in, you know, they've been through starting companies before, they've been through advising companies before, and so they were able to kind of guide us in the right directions.
Sorry, just sharing the paper.
No worries. Should I look at?
You can look at anyone.
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I don't want to like mess up your video.
That's fine. So what made you decide to pursue being an entrepreneur and a businesswoman rather than taking the usual route of college?
Yeah, so I always knew that I wanted to be a businesswoman because my dad is a businessman, and I always looked up to him growing up, and I was like, I want to do what my dad does. And it's actually kind of funny because when my brother and I took the time during that summer after my high school year to like start this business, I didn't even know what the word entrepreneur was. Like I had no clue. Someone was like, "You're an entrepreneur," and I had to go look it up online. I was like, "I don't know what this is. Like, why are you calling me this?" Which again, I guess you know is more to my being naive, but I didn't really see it as being an entrepreneur. I saw it as, you know, there was this problem and my brother and I were going to solve it. And that's kind of where it all stemmed from. And now it's just something that's stuck with me. You know, I really like being able to build something from scratch and call it, you know, this is my thing, this is my idea, and I'm building it. And I like that kind of sense of accomplishment once you get stuff done.
Yeah.
So.
Definitely.
So I know that we talked a little bit after your discussion at Open, and you were talking about how when you were trying to choose your major for college, you tried to, what was it, computer programming?
Computer science.
Computer science, and you really wanted to go into that major, but a lot of people asked you, like, what's your real major? And you kind of felt like a lot of pressure not to take that major. So what was that experience like for you, getting all of that pressure to not do what you wanted, and how do you think that's impacted your life, and do you regret the decision?
Like you said, when I was getting ready to go into college, I was like, you know, I'm exploring with computer science. I like programming. I think I might want to do this. And I got a lot of people being like, you know, girls don't do computer science, and like that's not something that like girls do. It's a guy's major. And I was kind of like, not too sure about that. Like I don't think they discriminate. Like I think that it's cool if a girl wants to pursue like computer science or anything in the STEM fields. But ultimately I chose to go with music business just because it was one of those things where I was getting kind of this pushback, and I had loved music too. I wouldn't say I necessarily regret it, but I wish that, you know, I had spent the time that I wasn't necessarily majoring in computer science. I wish I had spent a lot more of that time learning things rather than just saying, you know, my major's music business and I'm going to stick with it. And I wish that the music business program that I was in had more computer science classes too. I think that that's something that's very important for anyone now.
And what would you say to girls who are going through this process right now, that they want to go into a certain career but people tell them it's too male dominated or things like that, and they choose not to go into it? What would you say, what advice would you give to those girls?
No, I would say don't let it stop you. Just because it's male dominated doesn't mean you can't get into it and completely own it, right? And so I would say just go for it. And then if you choose to do something like I did, like if you want to follow maybe something that you've been more passionate about for longer in your life, you know, but you're also interested in this other field, know that you can learn two things at once, right? There's no one that says you can only learn music right now, like you can't do both. Like I would just sit down, take the time, and, you know, learn whatever you want to learn. Don't let other people stop you.
What influenced your decision to leave NYU and pursue MySocialCloud? It's kind of a risk, so what was your thought process when you were going in that journey?
Definitely. So thought process at the time was we had already raised the $1 million, so we already had money in the bank. We already had a solid idea, a working prototype. We had people using our site. And then it was one of those things where our investors were like, all right, we gave you guys money to run this business, why are you still in school? And so I was like, you know, maybe school's not the best option right now. And I thought about it, and part of my other thought process there was, you know, the worst that can happen is the company fails and I go back to school, which is, by the way, where all my friends are right now, so I'm not really losing anything, right? I would lose more by not going, because you never know what's going to happen if your business takes off. So my thought process was the fallback is I go back to college, where, you know, everyone else is doing that anyway, so who cares? I had the money in the bank, I had people using the site. It wasn't like I was just like completely broke and just being like, I'm not doing this anymore, you know? Like I had the things set in place to be able to allow myself to make that decision and make sure that it was going to be a good outcome.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
And was it a difficult decision to make? Did you ever regret it?
I don't regret it. It was definitely difficult at the time. Going through it, I feel like I made much more, in my mind, I made much more of a big deal than it really was. Just because it's like one of those things where all your friends are like, so where are you dorming next year? And like all these things, and you're like, well, I'm not coming back to school. And then all your friends are like, what do you mean you're not coming back to school? Like, what are you doing? And so it was one of those things. And then it's also like a perception thing, because you have all your friends in high school who are like, oh, you're a college dropout. And it's like, yeah, I'm a college dropout, but it's because I'm actually doing something awesome rather than like I couldn't make the grades, right?
Yeah.
Like I finished NYU with like my freshman year 3.8, which is like not bad. So while running the business full time. So it's like, I don't know. I don't regret it. It was just running through that thought process and what is everyone going to think of you that kind of blows it up in your mind more than it should be.
And I know that there's like so many pressures in society to act in a certain way and look in a certain way, so it must have been so hard to, you know, kind of do something that's not in the norm.
Yeah, I think it was tough for my parents too, because my parents had to go explain to all their friends, like, both of our kids just dropped out of college, like the only 2 kids that we have, and we were like, sorry guys, like, it's gonna be okay, but it was tough for them to overcome too, and that was a big, like, my parents actually flew out to New York, and like we had dinner. They flew my brother out too, and we had dinner, and it was like a big deal. Like, are you guys sure that this is what you guys want to do? Because realize once you go down this path, like your life won't be the same.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did you ever expect your company to grow the way it did and get the publicity that it did? I mean, did you think that was gonna happen?
I guess not really. When I look back, I don't know what I expected from it. I really, I don't know what my expectations were. Yeah. But everything seemed to work out for, you know, a good way, right? Like, I was able somehow to get lots of press. Obviously, we have an amazing story with social media, being young kids, you know. So that whole thing is like a huge press, like, ticking time bomb. Like, people love that. But I don't know, that helped, and then the growth, the product, you know, having the right team. We had an amazing team of engineers and designers, and so it was just, you know, everything paired together that really made everything happen. And I'm not sure if I told you, because I think before I met you, it wasn't public knowledge, but our company just got acquired by another company. And so
we saw that on Google.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And I guess I can say I never expected that from when we started the project to, you know, not even just 2 years later, people coming to us with offers being like, you guys have such an awesome technology that we want to buy it, you know, and that was something that was really cool too.
Yeah. And I feel like the press really, well, people in general really want to work with younger people because they feel like we're the next generation of people to join the workforce. So I feel like if you're young and you're starting a business, you get a lot of advice and help and mentorship.
You do. It's one of those things where, like, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you're young, so don't people discriminate against you? And I'm like, you know, no, they don't. They think it's really awesome that you're doing something, and, like, I'm realizing, like, I'm getting ready to turn 21. So it's like, I'm realizing that, like, once I crossed that bridge from 19 to 20, people were like, you're no longer a teenager, so, like, anything that you do is, like, significantly less cool because people expect you to, like, be grown up. So it's one of those things where I'm like, take advantage of being young while you have it, because you get older really fast. Once you get out of high school, it rolls. So, yeah. And you have, like, an excuse, right? So, like, when I was still at NYU and I was working on the business, I would, like, people that I wanted to talk to, like investors or just big business people that I really wanted to do deals with, I was just like, hey, I'm a student and I want to learn about what you're doing, right? And it's a great way to just be like, no one's going to turn down a student who's eager to learn, right? So it's one of those things, whereas if you're like, so I'm a business owner and I want to, like, do a deal with you, people are like, I'm not sure if I really want to do a deal with you, you know? So it's like, it's a good way to use some of those cards to get in places that you want to be.
So we know that you've been featured on Forbes, the Huffington Post, Woman 2.0, and TechCrunch. Can you tell us about how that was like?
Yeah, so getting press is always kind of fun. It's one of those things that, you know, more people are learning about your business, then more people are translating. It translates to getting more users, more customers, more questions, and just, I don't know, like, it creates a great platform for your business to be able to be spread across the world, which is awesome. I love working with some of the people there. Like, I love all the people at Women 2.0. They're amazing women. And so that's always fun to meet these people.
Yeah.
Since all the viewers may not know what Women 2.0 really does, would you mind explaining a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Women 2.0 is an organization of women who are, I think, mostly focused in, like, technology type things. But I guess it runs the gamut of people who have different types of businesses, and they have different conferences throughout the year. They have different, like, Founder Fridays, where they're, like, you can go on a Friday and listen to a couple founders speak and then mix and mingle with other women founders that are in your area. Or if you're traveling, you can go to Founders Friday in other cities. So it's really just a great community for women entrepreneurs to connect. And I feel like it's rare, especially if you're in tech or in any of the STEM fields, to like have other women to connect with who are like doing similar things. So that's why I love it, because it's like I hang out with guys 99% of my time, and so when I get to see women doing awesome things too, it excites me.
Why do you think that is, that there's so many guys and not as many women? Do you know? Or?
I'm not 100% sure. Some of it might stem from like society's like, and I feel like it's getting better, but society's kind of pressure for girls to like go into these other fields rather than like technology, because I know growing up, like, I was always very math and science oriented. I was always really good at math and science. And so I was, like, in middle school, I was kind of like a nerdy person. Like, I wasn't necessarily like one of those people that was like super popular and stuff, because I was always like acing my math tests or whatever, right? And I thought it was cool. I was like, I'm super good at math, so like come at me, But other people like didn't see that as being a cool thing. And so I think some of that pressures people to go into, or pressures girls to go into like these other things. And I'm sure there's pressure on the guys' end. I'm not a guy, so I don't know, but I'm sure there's pressure on their end to like go into fields that'll, make them lots of money so that they can be successful and take care of their family, because that's still what society sees as like the norm. Whereas girls, it's more of like I went to like very traditional high school too. I went to an all-girls Catholic high school, and so
that too.
Okay, so you guys know. We had like cooking classes and stuff like that, and it was very geared towards, become a mother and like, go out and do these things. And there are a lot of girls that just want to be mothers, and I think that's great, because someone needs to raise children that are going to do awesome things, right? Not to say guys can't either, but I don't know. For me, it just wasn't so much of that. It was more like, I want to be a businesswoman. I love doing business. I love kind of having that, making my stake in a company and saying, this is my thing, this is my idea, and I'm going to make it happen.
And so you talked about, in middle school and maybe into high school, how you kind of like math and science and seemed a bit nerdy. And I feel like that's a problem for a lot of girls around the world. There's so many girls like math and sciences, but somewhere over middle school they realize it's not cool, completely change into a different person. So what was your experience with that? How did you battle that pressure?
So one of the things that was, not that I meant to like bash my high school, one of the things that was really good about my high school was that once I got there, like, since it's all girls, there's not like that pressure of like, oh, does this guy like me, or things like that. So it was like, it was really cool if you were like doing the AP and honors classes, and you can be like, I'm an AP student or whatever, because it's like all the girls are like, you're just girls, and you all just are kind of competing against each other to like, get the best grades in the best classes. So that kind of took out that level of, what are the guys going to think of me type of thing, which was good. And when I was going through high school, we didn't have the like STEM program, and I know that they were like my high school was trying to get like more of a STEM focus when I was a senior, like when I was just getting out of it. But I think that a lot of things, like getting high schools to have these STEM programs and like focusing more on like having more science, more technology classes, more of these things, is a great thing. So I try and go and like speak to high schools and stuff and be like, this is something that you should do, because if girls could be exposed to this stuff at like a much earlier age, then I think, there wouldn't be that level of, they would be like, no, I already know that I like this regardless of what everyone else thinks, I love TED Talks. I watch a lot of TED Talks.
TED Talks are amazing.
And so I was flattered for them to like contact me and be like, hey, so do you want to give a TEDx talk? And I was like, yes, I'll be there. So that was really cool. And I like the TEDx youth ones in particular because, or at least me speaking, because it was like, there are people that are still trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives, right? They're like high school kids who are like, they still have the whole world in front of them. And I feel like you really have a chance to inspire people at those ones because they're just getting ready to go into college. They're not 100% sure what they want to do. And it's like you're going out there telling them, you can do whatever you want to do. Whereas I feel like when you're older, you can still do that to some degree, but sometimes you already have your mind made up of like, I know these things and these are the things that I know. And like if you're older and you have a family, then it's hard to like completely switch passions and that whole thing. So it was cool to be able to talk to youth and know that, I might be actually making a difference and inspiring these people to go do something that maybe otherwise they wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
And actually, we were doing a bit of research on you, and I was really excited to hear about your book that you're writing, 2 Billion Under 20, I believe.
Yeah.
So what's that experience been like for you? What kind of people have you met? What kind of advice have you gotten?
Definitely. So that has been writing a book, I never thought of it this way, but writing a book is like starting a startup because you don't know anything about writing or publishing a book, right? And it's like this completely new territory, and especially in the case of, so I'm co-authoring this with a friend of mine, Jared Kleinert, and it's like one of those things where both of us have zero clue. So we've been reaching out to tons of people being like, all right, so where do you start in like writing a book and publishing a book? And we're going to self-publish the book, so it's like more work because we're like doing everything ourselves rather than getting a publisher. And then, so the book format is compiling 75 stories from 75 youth all over the globe. So we have people from India, Dubai, Australia, Singapore, like all over, and then obviously the United States, a lot of people too. Just telling their stories about them starting businesses, or we have people that have, escaped genocide, people that are Olympic athletes, people that are actors on Disney Channel, we just run this full gamut of people who have escaped genocide to people that are in movies, and it's just it's interesting to see everyone's different perspective all over the globe of things that are happening to everyone the same age, right? Which is cool. It's always interesting to me, we have one person who submitted a story that was telling about his experience in Sierra Leone and him spending all his time trying to generate electricity so that he can stay up at night and read his books, right? And then he tells his story of coming to America and how here everyone takes that for granted, and it's just they turn on the light switch and they expect it to be. And he was I spent the first 14 years of my life trying to figure out how to just turn on a light, right? How to make this light work. Which is super humbling to me as I'm reading this story, and I'm I never in a million years growing up in America, would have crossed my mind that this is something that kids spend a good portion of their growing up years trying to figure out, right? Because to me it's always been I just go over, and as long as I'm tall enough to reach the light switch, I turn it on. And so it's super humbling to read these stories of these kids that are the same age as me, but have radically different experiences. And it kind of creates this sense of, how can I help them help themselves, which is cool. So
what lessons have you learned through this process of meeting all these amazing people?
Yeah, so I think I've focused, and this is maybe a personal accomplishment thing. I feel for the 2 years of building MySocialCloud, it was very much head to the ground, I need to build this thing. And so I was not really as concerned about what was going on in the world around me. I was this is my job, I need to build this. Whereas now, going through the book, meeting all these people has opened my eyes up to the business, while it's awesome that I'm doing a business, isn't the only thing that matters, right? There are lots of things that you can do just on a small day-to-day basis that can make people happy. And it's not so much about your accomplishments, it's more about, how can you go about life making sure that you're impacting people in a positive way. And if that's just walking down the street and smiling at people, then that's cool, because you never know what experience those people have. And it gave me an appreciation for everyone has a story, right? And trying to figure out those stories from people is super powerful.
And so what do you hope to leave your readers with?
Yeah, so I guess kind of two sorts of things. First of all is inspiration and motivation. So hopefully reading these stories will give them kind of a springboard to go and be inspired to maybe do their own thing. And then what I've asked all the authors that we have to do is give at the end or throughout the story a 3-step or 5-step process of how if someone's inspired by your story, how can they go and follow in your footsteps? Which I think is cool, because there are a lot of books of inspirational stories, but not a lot of books of here's an inspirational story and here's how you can get started on building your own story, right? And so I think that that's a really unique and cool thing, that hopefully, you know, if anyone picks up the book, it's like, this story really touched me, and by the way, here are the things that I can do to go like make this happen on my own, which is cool.
And speaking of a 3 to 5 step process of how to get to the point where they are now, what would you say was the 3 to 5 step process of getting to where you are now?
Right, so the first thing for me was identifying like a vision and a goal. So like the goal was, you know, I want to build this platform that, I guess in the case of MySocialCloud, I want to build this platform that stores usernames and passwords and auto-logs people in. Which is specific, but specific goals are good because it makes them easier to accomplish. And then finding good people that can help you accomplish that goal. In my case was my brother, and then another guy who came on as our co-founder, Shiv. And then, you know, working with those people endlessly and relentlessly to make sure that your goal comes true. Which was, you know, building the product for us and just making sure that we were getting people testing it, and just iterating off of it and making the product better. Seems fairly simple boiled down to it. It is simple. I guess people make things a lot more complicated in their head than they need to be. But it's as simple as, identifying a goal, finding the right team to accomplish that goal, and just going out and accomplishing it no matter what.
So on your website, it says you're currently working on your next startup. Can you tell us anything about that?
So a little bit. It's going to be in the ad tech space, so advertising technology. Just because I feel like it's going to be dealing with outdoor advertising, and I feel like if you think about outdoor advertising, it's like things like, I don't know if people, I consider this all one group probably because I'm still naive to outdoor advertising, but like magazines and like newspapers and billboards and you know, all the advertising that you see out and about. That industry hasn't really had change in the past 50 years besides like digital billboards. And so I'm gonna kind of create a marketplace to bring some of that stuff online in terms of buying it and selling it.
So kind of moving more towards gender inequality in your life, do you see it present in where you work right now? I mean, we kind of talked about how there's not a lot of women, but have you ever seen anyone like discriminated against, or have you been discriminated against, or any situations where that's been present in your life?
Right, so I am in a male-dominated industry. Obviously, technology is completely like male-dominated. I go into technology conferences and I'm like, this is the only place in the world where the women's line for the bathroom is like super short and the men's is like, you know, out the door of the conference. And so that's different. In terms of discrimination, you know, there are times where like I'll be at meetings with people and it'll be me and all these other guys, and I can tell that it's kind of like a boys club type of thing, you know, like we obviously have more of a connection because we're girls, so we can understand maybe more of what we go through, whereas guys understand more of what guys go through. And I don't think necessarily it's like intentional like discrimination, but there are times where like you can tell that like, not that they're trying to avoid making eye contact with you, but it's a lot easier for them to make eye contact with another guy than it is for them to make eye contact with a girl. And so I see a lot of that because I go into a lot of meetings with a lot of guys, and me being the only girl, and it's very obvious that like I am the only girl. But it's one of those things where like, even if it is a little bit of a boys club, you know, if you're going to go into an industry that is male dominated, I think that it's good for you to recognize that up front and be like, you know, I can play with the boys. Like, you know, I can be in there and I can, you know, do everything that they can do. And so you almost have to be a little bit stronger to be able to go in a room and overcome that and be like, I belong here. And I think that it's important for everyone to know, whether you're a guy in a girl-dominated industry, I know there's a lot of that in probably like fashion and stuff like that, or a girl in a guy-dominated industry, you know, you deserve to be there, right? Something got you in that room with those people, and so you can't, even if there is that little level of, you know, you guys are guys and I'm a girl, you know, you deserve to be there, so don't let that stop you.
So has that caused any problems for you? Like, you haven't been able to take up certain opportunities because people were uncomfortable with you being a woman or anything like that?
So not really for me, and I think that some of that might come from, I co-founded the company with my brother who is a guy, and so we kind of play that to our advantage too, whereas like if it's something that is, you know, if we, and you can kind of tell by looking at people online, if it's going to be more of like a guys club thing, then like he takes the lead on talking to people, right? Or if it's going to be like me talking to a woman investor, then obviously it's going to be me taking the lead, because women investors like to invest in a lot of women startups and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like picking and choosing your battles, right? Like, and I think that kind of, that difference of, you know, him having different skills than me, he's more technical than I am, he's a guy. A lot of the guys in tech are obviously a lot more technical. A lot of the girls do a lot of the more business and PR and that kind of stuff. And so you kind of play those to your strengths and weaknesses and say, he's going to go do this and I'm going to go do this. That's why I think picking a co-founder too for a startup at least is important. Make sure that you have complementary things.
So what advice would you give to women out there who want to create their own business and who are too afraid to, or they think that they won't have the opportunities to, or something like that?
Right. I would just say, you know, don't be afraid. People always say the biggest risk is not taking a risk at all, right? Because if you're not taking a risk, then you're just doing what everyone else is doing, or doing what you're supposed to be told to do. And like, if you're not taking that risk, you already know what your outcome is going to be, right? Like, you already know, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get married, I'm going to get a job, which is like what everyone else in this world does.
Yeah.
Whereas if you decide, you know, take a little bit of an alternative path, things don't work out, you still go to college and get married and get a job, right? Like, you're not losing anything. You're losing things by not risking things and not taking that chance. Failure depends on your expectation of learning, right? And what that means to me is, like, everyone's like, oh, like, I'm afraid to fail. Like, I don't want to fail because of what people will think of me. And I'm like, if you think of that quote, failure depends on your expectation of learning, then it's like, you're not failing as long as you're learning something in the process. So as long as you have like a takeaway and stuff that you've learned from that, which if you're starting a business or going out and doing whatever you want to do, you're going to learn stuff, right? Like, you're going to learn why it's not working or why it is working, and all those little steps along the way. And so I think that that's important for people to know too. As long as you're learning something and taking something away, you're not failing, you're learning. And I think that once people realize that too, it seems less scary, because it's like, you know, your whole life you'll be learning, so why not just do it now?
Yeah, definitely. So since you're still so young, we assume that you remember the pressures of being a teenage girl. What do you think is the hardest thing for a teenage girl in our society, which is constantly telling you not to do this or not to do that? And how do you overcome that?
So I think of it, a lot of it, and this could be completely different for other people, but I'll give you my opinion because of, I don't know, how I was raised, who I grew up to be. I think a lot of it for me was like, I don't know if this is terrible, but a lot of it was like wanting to impress guys.
Yeah.
Right? And like wanting to be the girl that like can get guys or whatever, you know, and like that whole type of thing, which I think is human nature, right? Because it's, biology says that like people want to be together and like, you know what I mean? So a lot of it stemmed from that. And then a lot of it, I went through this phase in high school, which I think was like the best phase I ever could have gone through, which was like I don't care what other people think. And I think a lot of that actually stemmed from going in an all-girls school, where I was just like, I'm not surrounded by guys, so I don't care. And then that translated to when I got to college, I was just like, I don't care. And when you go to an all-girls school, it's kind of this expectation of like, you know, where am I going to meet guys? So like, I don't really care, you know? And I think that that was great for just my development and who I am, because it gave me 4 years of just, you know, finding out who I really was and figuring that out early. And then when I got to college and where I am now, I'm like, I don't care, like, I'm not trying to impress anyone, I'm trying to be the best myself. And if other people, like, you know, if guys like me, then that's fine, and if they don't like what I'm doing, then that's fine too, because I, like, at the end of the day, it's not that it's, like, all about me, but, like, you're gonna do what makes you happy, right? And I think the earlier that you figure out what those things are, is better. And the thing I always say too is you have to figure out those things without outside pressure, right? So like I have a lot of friends that are girls that'll be like, well, like, I don't know if this thing makes me happy, or like, because, you know, their boyfriend or whatever says like that's not like something that you should do or whatever. And then on the flip side, I have a lot of girls who, like, their boyfriend really likes something, and I can tell that, like, they don't like it, but they go along with it. Because I'm sure you guys know, you have friends where, like, you're like, you're being super fake, and like I can tell that you don't like that thing, right? But I know that you're doing it because this boy is doing it. And so I think it's always good to kind of take some time to yourself and figure out what do you really like, regardless of everyone else, and then pursue those things endlessly. I have like friends who like spent their whole high school career like at the all-girls school. They're like, I'm never gonna find guys. So they're like trying to find guys. I'm like, you gotta find yourself. Yeah. And then guys will come, right?
That's exactly true. That's exactly
and it's like the right guys will come because you already know who you are and you know you're doing what you love, and they like it for the right reasons, right? Yeah. Because you like it. So I'm like, it's a lot easier to find yourself first and then find someone to like team up with for the rest of your life. Yeah. So, yeah.
Going on the same basis of being a teen girl, what personally was the hardest thing for you as a teen girl in a society that kind of tells you constantly how to act or look?
Yeah, I'm trying to think what the hardest thing was for me. I think a lot of it was finding exactly who I was without so many outside pressures. And I feel like to some extent I'm only 20 now, and I feel like to some extent I found a lot of that out throughout high school, but I feel like, you know, who you are is ever evolving based on your surroundings and things that happen to you. And I think that one of the hardest things for me was kind of making that jump of like, there was a point in life where I cared what everyone thought, and I like spent a lot of time caring about it and trying to be the person that I thought people wanted me to be. And then I realized that once I found out like what my true passions were and who I really was, and like being that person to the full extent and not caring what other people thought about that, actually like eliminated all the time and stress of like caring. And it also made me like, I was a lot more of a fun person to be around because I didn't care. Right? Whereas when you're like super focused and like trying to do something 100% of the time, and you know, people can tell that you're almost trying too hard. Whereas when it's just natural and you're being who you are, then it's like you're not trying hard, you're trying to be who you are, right? And like I think a lot of people can realize that, and it makes life a lot more fun. So I think kind of overcoming that was a big part of life, and I feel like it still is, like trying to like not trying to, but like trying to go through every day like being who I am, rather than like being this person that people want me to be, which is important to my happiness, and so that's what I care about. I want to be happy, so yeah.
And you know, not a lot of people have the same opportunity to discover yourself through like an all-girls school environment. So what advice would you give to the middle school girls or the high school girls who are starting or are in the middle of that process of, you know, constantly caring what everyone else thinks and not caring about what you need to do?
Right. I think one of the biggest things for people to do, and maybe this is a little bit isolationist of me, but like is to remove yourself from like a setting, like take a weekend to like not have friends and not have, you know, all these external factors, and like sit down and really think about like who you are, what truly makes you happy. Like don't lie to yourself, like what makes you happy, because you know internally like what really makes you happy. So find those things, and then, you know, build yourself up over time. Like it's a process, right? Becoming who you want to be and who you are it's a process. So like spending time doing those things that make you happy, and making sure that those are really things that fulfill you, and like taking time to yourself to be able to kind of recheck these things without like the pressures of your friends being like, oh, like we should like go do all these things, and it's like I don't really like doing these things. So it's like, yeah, I guess just take the time to yourself to figure out who you really are.
And I know we asked this question earlier, that what advice would you give to women who are starting off their businesses, but kind of similar but kind of different at the same time, what advice would you give to teen girls who are interested in starting their own businesses?
I think one of the biggest things that you can do is find a mentor. So find someone who's been where you want to be, and kind of team up with them and ask them questions. And I think a lot of people that are entrepreneurs have this thing of like, once you connect with someone and you tell them what you're doing, you don't want to fail, right? Like you want to make sure that you're impressing this person and like making sure that their time mentoring you is well spent, so you try as hard as you can to like get there. And so I think finding a mentor is an awesome thing to do. And I think going along with that, a lot of things that people don't realize is that there are a lot of people who have done awesome things who like don't get as emailed as much as people would think, or like, you know, surprisingly, they're really easy to like get in touch with. Like if you send an email, they will reply, and a lot of people don't send an email simply because they think they won't reply, like they're too busy. When like in reality, you know, if you've done something that like took you a long time to accomplish, and you have like younger people who are like, I really want to follow in your footsteps, that's awesome for you. You're like, I am inspiring other people to like want to do their thing. And like there's never this feeling, or at least for me, there's never this feeling of like I don't have time to help you, or like I can't help you, right? Like sometimes there are specific things that people will ask me that I'm like, I really can't do that, but like here are 3 other approaches you might take to be able to do that. I think there's not a lot of like rejection in terms of that. There's a lot more being accepted than I think people actually think. So. Yeah.